Okay, well, I think we're just about ready to get started. So hello everyone, welcome to the 5th edition of Unmasking Plastic. Today we're talking about circularity in this webinar, Circulate It. And we'll be digging deep into how we can generate truly circular economies with plastic, the current systems we have are not circular and they're typically linear, what that means, and how we can actually achieve that circularity that we're all the buzzwords are talking about. So just for everyone to share with our panelists, could you post in the chat where you're joining us from? So we can see, I know I see some people from Thailand, Peru, Portugal, so I'm excited to have everyone post. Please, throughout the webinar, use the Q&A function. Do not post your questions in the chat because we're likely to miss them. Post them in the Q&A, and those will be the questions that we get to towards the end. And without any further ado, I think we can begin. Patty, over to you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us one more week. And I really like the panel. I like all of our panels, but I precisely like this circularity approach because I think that there is a lot of confusion. And during our series, we have been debunking some plastic pollution misconceptions within the context of research and communication, international policy, reduction of waste at source, and consumption behavioral change. And today we're thrilled to be digging into the circular economy approach. For that, we have 4 amazing panelists, which they are some of the best in their field from different regions. And I would like to start by asking them to introduce themselves in a few minutes. Who would like to start? Justine, for example.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It seems there's people from all around. So if I understand well, very quickly who I am and what I do, right? So I'm Justine, I'm based in Brussels, Belgium, and I work for Zero Waste Europe. Zero Waste Europe is an NGO that works with many change makers to eliminate society waste from our society, basically. And we work all across Europe. We're a network of organizations across Europe, across 30 countries. And maybe in a few words, when I say we work with change agents, there's quite a few of those. So one thing is that we work with decision makers. So as you may know, the European Union is adopting quite a lot of legislation around waste management, around plastic, around the environment in general. So we work with decision makers in the EU, so with the European Commission and with members of the European Parliament to really push for policies that will bring systemic change, and not just to try to fix the symptom, but really look at a systemic approach to really have legislation that moves us toward waste prevention, reuse, and really avoid plastic pollution from the start in a way. But we help them transition to become zero waste cities with a lot of kind of tips for on the ground, better management, better prevention, etc. And one thing we also do is trying to identify kind of new business models and new initiatives that are really looking at developing the solutions of tomorrow and the real solutions of tomorrow. So, and try to make case studies out of those to try to then upscale them. So we have many case studies, for example, of local systems of reuse and how can we make those regional, possibly national, etc. So that's kind of the different angles we're putting together to try to push for the transition. Happy to tell you more later.
Great, thank you very much. Linda, would you like to continue, please?
Sure. My name is Linda Godfrey, and I'm based in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm the manager of the Waste Research Development and Innovation Roadmap Implementation Unit. Very big mouthful. But my job is to implement the South African Ministry of Science and Innovation's mandate around waste, R&D and innovation. So it's really around directing our investment and strategic approach in waste R&D and innovation. And it's it's very much focused on end of pipe because it is a waste roadmap. So it is from the perspective of, waste as resource and unlocking the opportunity that provides. But more and more we're shifting into the circular economy discussion and moving more upstream in terms of what does it mean in terms of consumption, product design, alternative delivery mechanisms, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm particularly passionate about raising awareness and improving the situation around waste management on the African continent. We just see the photographs coming out of different cities and different countries in Africa around the state of waste dumping, etc. And there really is an urgent need to bring waste under control on the continent. And obviously this discussion around the circular economy and what that means is really important for Africa. I think that, the signals that we're seeing from Southeast Asia in terms of the magnitude and the scale of the problem it's a forewarning to Africa, is that if we don't get the systems right now, that's the road that we're heading down as a continent. So I'm really passionate in terms of raising the profile of this issue in Africa. Thank you.
Great. So that's why it's perfect that you are here with us today, because we have few participants in the SOA from Africa, and probably some will be very inspired, and maybe you have some interns in the future for new researchers, who knows? Thank you very much for sharing your background with us, Linda. Thomas, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you. And what a huge task you have there, Linda. Inspiring to see you so passionate with that, really. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Thomas. I am based in Patagonia in the south of Chile. It's very cool to see that there's people from all around the world here. I am the founder of a company called Karun. Karun means to be nature in the indigenous language of the local people here. What we do is we link nature conservation with rural empowerment through product innovation. So what we do is we're creating very high quality products. We're focused on eyewear for the time being, proving that we can make the same quality eyewear than any other big brand today in the world, but done under a very different logic. We started out more than 8 years ago, and the more we went more and more in depth, trying to see how we can incorporate processes and systems or a model that can be based on the logic of a circular economy. We've realized that we want to take it further, taking it into regeneration. So we created a model which we call the Karun Conscious Development Model, where we turn waste into opportunities for rural communities. There's a long-lasting relationship with the rural communities here, so that then they have the empowerment and the cohesiveness, the cohesion within the community, so that they have the economic incentives and the tools to protect their own nature where they live in. So now we're working with over 600 families directly. We have a full team living in the communities we work with, so that we can help protect over 400,000 hectares of wild nature here in Patagonia. It's a beautiful place. And the goal of all of this is that we can use the sunglasses or the eyewear as a tool to inspire people into reflecting about one question. And that question is, what would the world look like if we understood that we are all nature? If we actually understood.
I will ask you more about that later on. So just hold it a second,
yes,
because
otherwise
I cannot ask you. No, it's
Good.
fine. It's fine. Thank you very much. Nadia, please, will you mind to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadia. I'm from Peru. I'm a marine biologist and also a mother of a boy that has only 1 year, and he's sleeping inside the room. So that is why I'm inside a car, to avoid waking him up. I'm the co-founder of Loop, that means Life Out of Plastic. And we are a social enterprise that raises awareness about plastic pollution. As an enterprise, we created a whole commercial area where we started promoting shopping bags that were made of recycled plastic bottles. We wanted to create 100% Peruvian product, 100% recycled product, and also an item that empowered the user to reduce the amount of single-use plastic that they use while shopping, right? So we started selling those bags, and with the money we develop different kind of campaigns. So as Loop is a movement, we have different platforms where we invite consumers or citizens, and especially youth, to rethink the way they are consuming and understanding how we are all related to the problem that we are seeing now or at the sea. So during the beach cleanup, we try to not only raise awareness in the participants, but also collect some data that can also then be shared with the companies and also with the governments, and also with all the followers that we have, and try to make them understand how important is the role that they are playing in their transition to a responsible consumption. And now that we are talking about circular economy, we need to understand how we as consumers are an important part of this transition. So we are based in Peru, but now the team is around the world, and we have conducted several campaigns that maybe we can talk a little bit more during the panel. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to answer all the questions that you have.
No, thank you very much for all of you, because it's such an inspiring panel. So I'm a bit nervous even. Okay, so I will start by saying that I think that by now I doubt that anyone has never heard the words circular economy and the need to shift our ways we produce and deal with plastic to a circular economic business model. But more and more, the term has become like a buzzword. And in my opinion, it's been greatly misused. So much so that many people try to use it as a synonym for recycling. Linda, I would love to start asking you, because now that you are a professor, I would like you to explain a little bit more, and if you could please explain to us what is the most ideal concept of the circular economy, and why considering plastic circular economy is so important for plastic products and waste management.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The circular economy has become a buzzword, and very often, even in the African context, in policy documents that I see coming out of the EU, for example, we still very often see it used in this context of almost a synonym for recycling, or a synonym for the waste hierarchy. And for me, the circular economy is not even about waste management. I don't know if there's an ideal definition. The way that I like to think about the circular economy is quite a simple one, in that it's about keeping resources in flow for as long as possible at their maximum value. Those are the three criteria for me: keeping resources in flow for as long as possible at their maximum value. And so it's this paradigm shift away from waste to resource management. And for me, that's essentially what the circular economy is about. It's about sustainable resource management. It's about how we manage our resources within a country. And if you look at what's coming out of the EU, for example, I think most of the circular economy work has been based on this issue of resource scarcity. It's been founded on, the critical raw materials, which I think back in 2014 started at about 11 critical raw materials. I think it's now up to about 30 critical raw materials. So for me, it's a case of, countries really seriously need to look at what resources they have as a country, and whether those resources are sufficient to meet their socio-economic development objectives, to address issues of poverty, for example, to grow economies, to sustain the needs of the population. So that's why, for me, it doesn't make sense that we extract resources, we make things, we consume things, and then we dump them into, and in Africa, it's mostly dump sites, it's uncontrolled or controlled dump sites. And we're happily parting with our resources, not thinking about what happens when those resources run out. For many African countries, their economies are based very heavily on mining. For South Africa, for example, I think around about 8% of our GDP comes from the mining sector. And what happens when we run out of gold in the ground? What happens when we run out of platinum? but yet we happily, export our electronic waste to other countries for processing, and we lose access to those resources. As a country, we're a net importer of plastic. So we import plastic into the country, we make things, we consume things, and then we dump them. And from an economic perspective, from a balance of trade perspective, that doesn't make sense. So that's really is the way that I've interpreted the circular economy. It's around understanding the resource needs of a country, and do you have them? If you don't have them, what do you do to fill the gap? So, when it comes to plastic, I think this is a particularly challenging one when it comes to circularity. Thomas was talking about, getting communities involved in kind of managing waste and more kind of local solutions to deal with waste. And for things like organic waste, that's easy. You can compost it, you can put it into anaerobic digestion, and you can produce biogas. But what do you do with plastic in rural settings, in small communities? And I think that's probably one of the biggest innovation challenges of the 21st century, is to look at kind of decentralized management of plastic. Because either we ban it, like many African countries are doing, because they just don't see a solution to deal with plastic, or we have to transition to other materials, which I have problems with, because not necessarily all alternative materials are better. And I think we really need to evidence and inform our transition to other materials. But how do we improve circularity of plastic? Because, I think many people are communicating this message that we can simply recycle our way out of the plastic problem. And we know that that's not possible. The Breaking the Plastic Wave report, which was published a few months ago, showed us that there is no one silver bullet that's going to solve the plastic problem. It's not just about recycling, or it's not just about improved waste management. So I think for me, when we talk circular economy and plastic, is that we have to look at the entire system. We have to look at reduced consumption. We have to look at alternative delivery methods. And I think, for developing countries, this is urgent right now, because they're being flooded with these products. I think so many companies, so many brand owners see developing countries, see emerging economies as new markets. And so for them, it's around flooding these markets with these single-use products. And at the same time, we're losing many of these traditional systems of product use and delivery methods, etc. So I think we need to seriously look at that. I had an interesting online discussion on Twitter recently in terms of, if a company puts a product onto a market and they know that there's no solution for that product, should they be allowed to put that product onto the market? So we're seeing this problem, for example, with disposable nappies in Africa. We're huge problems with just dumping of disposable nappies, which obviously contain large amounts of plastic. But the brand owners know that it's going to end up in the field, it's going to end up in rivers, it's going to end up in dump sites. So where does the responsibility lie? So I think the key thing for me when it comes to circular economy and plastic is we have to be having a discussion across this whole system in terms of reduced consumption, alternative delivery methods, reuse, transition to alternative materials where it makes sense. And then we have to bring waste under control. We have to improve the end-of-life management of plastic.
So essentially what you're saying is that we have to rethink plastics, right? And we have, Justine also works for Rethink Plastics, as well as Zero Waste Europe. And I think that some of, you have in Rethink Plastic, you have some precepts, right, Justine? And I would like to know, what are the main practices that you need to be changed, that we need to be changing in the current plastic system, so they can be adapted to a circular economy model, just as Linda was saying before?
Thank you, Patricia. And thank you, Linda, for the introduction, because I feel I'm going to try not to repeat too much, because I think it was very clear, and I wouldn't agree more, couldn't agree more. So indeed, Zero Waste Europe is part of a coalition of NGOs working in Brussels on EU policy that is called the Rethink Plastic Alliance, for the context. And I think one key element from us from the start is that at the beginning, and it's still the case at the moment to a certain extent, is that the plastic issue was seen as ocean plastic issue. And it's not just that, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the plastic in the ocean, it's not a problem, it's a problem. I'm pretty sure we're all ocean lovers in this call as well. But that's not where plastic pollution starts. Plastic pollution starts when feedstocks are started to be extracted, oil and gas in the US and other places, to create the plastic we're going to use. And then it has impact all along the value chain. There's the pollution linked to the production, for example, with those pellets of those small pellets, which are the basis of plastic, of everything basically, and they get spread out, you know, along the value chain. They got lost in transport, etc. And then obviously there's the whole pollution linked to the fact that a lot of the plastic we use at the moment, and at least the packaging, is single use. And there I'll go back to what Linda said, is that we can't just focus on the end of life and trying to prevent those plastics from leaking into the environment. We need to rethink the way we use plastic to start with. And so the reduction is key, because there's so many unnecessary plastic. I would say most of the single-use plastic are unnecessary and an unnecessary use of our resources. And then there's a question of design, because it's interesting to see some of the producers say, well, we need to better manage the waste. They need to better manage the waste. The thing is, as Linda said, they are not designing their products to be manageable. They're not meant, those single-use plastic packaging, especially if we're looking at all the sachet, very thin, flexible packaging. No one can manage that. And they're trying to put the responsibility on someone else, while they actually have the brand owners and the producers. They are the one who have the capacity and the ability to redesign their products they put on the market. And as Linda was saying, at least in Europe, at the very least, we have a system that is called extended producer responsibility, where the producers have to pay for the collection and the treatment of packaging at the end of life. But in most of the countries in the world, it's not even the case. So there's not even this little responsibility. And so what we're saying is that we really need to focus on the reduction, on the reuse, and rethink the way we just use and distribute our goods. So we're looking at solutions like, you know, reuse systems, making sure the products are more reusable, especially for packaging. There's a lot of opportunity there. Looking at systems like deposit return schemes, which are tools that can support reuse system. And we're also looking like more widely, like what are the barriers to reuse, for example, at the moment. And we have identified that one is the fact that each brand has its own format, for example, for a bottle or for a food container. Each salad bowl will have a different format because it's owned by someone else. And that's kind of a limit to scale up reuse and having an economies of scale. If you would have one format for a bottle for like 3 different formats, 33, 50, 1 liter, then you could have a pool of reusable that all the producers in that country, in that region could use, wash in the same facility, etc., and reuse. And then you would do the economies of scales, because one of the reasons single-use packaging is everywhere is that it's so cheap, because plastic is so cheap at the moment. So it's really about rethinking those systems, and there are solutions, and it needs to be in its scale up. So we're really much focusing on that and trying at the same time to raise awareness on the first solution. And one was mentioned by Linda, it's just the material substitution. We hear so much about bioplastic, which means either bio-based plastic, so from a biomass feedstock, or biodegradable or compostable plastic. But like having single-use packaging that is bio-based or biodegradable doesn't make sense if you can have a reuse system. It's just a substitution of one single use for another. So that's really what we're focusing on, trying to promote the real solutions versus what may seem an easy fix. But usually if it's an easy fix, you may have to question whether it's actually the real solution. Thank you.
Good. No, super. Thank you very much for sharing all of that information. Very complex, but very well explained. And yeah, I would like to continue talking with the branch side of the more private company. And I'm very thrilled, once again, that we can show more work made by young minds, putting nature and sustainability as the center of their business models, showing that it is possible to change business as usual towards more socially engaged and environmentally friendly practices, while still having a successful company. Nadia, Loop Peru at its core has the aim to empower citizens and create a positive social context change, just as you said before, within the communities where you operate. But how do you link all these issues by using a circular economy approach?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so first of all, we are a social enterprise. And when we started, we decided to create a business model that makes sense for us, that has a purpose. And our purpose is always to raise awareness about plastic pollution and encourage consumers to understand the power that they have to change what they are seeing. So in the social area of Loop, we have the commercial area, right? But we also have the social part of the enterprise. We develop different kind of platforms where we try to share information about the problem, about the solutions, about the options that we have. Because when we started like 10 years ago, there was no information, for example, about this problem in Spanish. So it was actually our curiosity that took us to understand what was happening and where this plastic were coming from. So when we started with the beach cleanups, we start seeing that it was not the solution, because we went to the same beach maybe every week and we were taking out tons or half tons and kilos of plastics and other items there. But we understood how powerful are these platforms to make the participants understand the problem. So we started creating these activities, and we saw how participants were like confused when they were cleaning and they pick up a bottle. Oh yes, a bottle. And they were asking, oh, how it is here, right? And then at the end of the beach cleanup, we started talking and reflecting with the participants, and we see how powerful were all the items that we were finding. So the straws, the plastic bags, but also items that make us happy, like the packaging of a cookie or a packaging of the ice cream. So we try to make people understand that we are not only eating the cookies or consuming the cookies, we are consuming also the packaging. And our decisions are encouraging the production of that packaging as well. So if we as consumers start choosing the products that make sense for us as aware or conscious consumers, we will start promoting the production of this type of products. So if we start deciding for a reusable bottle instead of plastic bottles, we will give a message to the industry as well. We need to understand how can we influence the industry, how can we influence the market to understand what is the role that we are playing in the circular economy. We are deciding what we are consuming. So we are giving, every time we decide, we are giving a message to the industry, to the market. Also in Loop, we collect data. So we have the amount of items that we collect, so we can see how much cigars, butts, or how much plastic bags. But also we have the brands, and we have gone to those companies that are the biggest companies in the world that are also here in Peru, and we have shown them the results, and we are inviting them in a friendly way, right? We are not going against them. We want to go with them and reach a solution together, because we are all playing a role here. So we are going to the companies with that information, but we are also going to the government. So we have shared the information with the Ministry of the Environment, for example, and we have helped the Ministry of the Environment to to create a law that is regulating the use of single-use plastic.
Wow.
So that is how we are trying to be part of the circular economy transition, is to understand how can consumer or citizens can make a change, but how can we as citizens can take some data or information and convince also other actors, such as the companies or the private sector and the government as well.
So it's a lot of work. It's a complex work, but obviously it's what we need to do. So thank you very much for taking all of that effort to have a better environment. Thomas, I think I have told you this a few times by now, but I really like Karun's anthem, which is "Let's look the world from a different point of view," and that's the part of the core philosophy of your company. Karun operates following a circular, restorative, and regenerative business model, and it's also a certified carbon neutral company. What are some of the more surprising challenges to developing a circular economy while taking all of these aspects into consideration?
Thank you, and thank you for the question. And I like what everyone has been saying. I agree, obviously. I like, Nadia, what you just said about basically collaboration and on working together with public, private sectors. There's no bad and good people. I definitely agree with that, and that's part of the new paradigm which we need to understand. We see the political sphere and in my country here in Chile and everywhere in the world, how divided we are, saying who's wrong, who's right. And I think the first step in all of this is to acknowledge that we are all responsible. There's not one that is more responsible than the other. And the only difference is there's some that have more power than others, but we're the same responsibility. Answering your question, I think it's definitely difficult, because if you want to create a business or any kind of project that you want to scale it and you want to make it big, especially in today's world that everything is fast, everything is hyper connected, and like you have so many different kinds of stimuli going into you, and you need to go like growing and going fast. Normally it's very tempting to go for the short-term solutions and not the long-term solutions, and normally short-term solutions are very much opposite to what the world needs. In my view, something that the circular economy lacks in today's conversation is the human side of it. It's too much about materials, and in my opinion, materials are just a consequence of human people and relationships and dreams and goals and visions. So at least what we are trying to work on in Karun is not taking the conversation away a little bit from technology and from processes, which obviously it's important, but I think a lot of energy in the world is already put there, which I think is good, and that's going to change many things. But there's a reality around the world, especially in underdeveloped countries. Well, we have Africa here, South America, where I am now, and where Nadia is also. That is a very common reality that I see it every day, and I work a lot with local communities here, and you see that there's two main realities in these communities. On one side, there's a big lack of opportunities, funding, education, health, and at the same time, there's no infrastructure to do anything about the waste. So you have all this waste lying around, and there's no infrastructure, and there's no economic incentive, and the big corporations don't have any incentive to do something about it, and obviously the state is inefficient or ineffective, so they can't get there. So what do we do? So at least our experience so far has been beautiful. The only thing you really need to do is build trust and love. It's the only thing that you need. If you build trust and you build relationships, looking the other person to the eye, you go, you visit their houses, you sit down, you get to know them, you get to understand their way of life and their problems, then you can empathize with that, and you can incorporate those needs and those urgencies into your own business models. And if you do that, then the approach is completely different. Then the approach is, how do you see the local community as a team, as a part of your organization as well, and how can we together build solutions. So for example, and with this I finish, but what we do is, and in Karun at least, when we approach a certain community to try to retrieve the waste, to make it into our value chain, what we do is we work with the local people that don't have access. Normally it's families that have a monthly income of around $150 a month as a family. So it's people living in very poor conditions. So what we do is we work with them so that they, in their free time or as an additional income, they can go and collect the waste and sell it to us. But then we pay them for that. But then we just don't leave it there, because that can generate a bigger problem. If you make people rely on the income they generate with the waste, that becomes a problem in the long term, because they need waste to keep having the income. So that their incentive is for waste to exist. So what we do is then we work with them for at least a minimum of 4 years, periodically, month by month, so that they can use that income as a seed capital. So that with that, they can start their own micro businesses, obviously with triple impact, sustainability, and all of the circular economy logic, so that they can have opportunities that are created on their own with the tools that they have, so that they can develop first of all, their trust in themselves, and second, their business model or their income capacity. So what I mean with this is that you don't finish, or you don't end up on the material side of things, but you incorporate the most important thing, which is the people's lives around it, and how they can be empowered with what they have without anyone subsidizing anything, but just supporting them and building trust. And I think what you build there it's a more healthy community and a collaborative approach to a problem that I would say that it's impossible for one organization or one country to tackle on their own. So I think a part of that logic could be replicated in other parts of the world. I think it would be beautiful.
So basically, none of the capitalism techniques that we have today should be applied, right? we take it down.
I think that's a little bit harsh, but it's a combination.
No. I think that it's really good, everything you just said, and I think that it's very inspiring, and it's going to be useful for people who are like some of the entrepreneurs that we have in SOA will be very much inspired by what you just said. So thank you very much. And continuing just with what you just said, you all, as we mentioned already, like you all come from different regions and countries, in the case of Nadia and Thomas. So the way the circular economy and waste management systems function likely differs from one to the other one. How do you think that circular economy waste management systems really work at your regional level? And do you think are specific barriers in the region where you live? Just what you said before, Thomas. I think that it should not be easy to actually recycle and produce high quality plastics from fishing nets found on the coastline. Or Linda, last year I carried out a series of workshops in the western coast of Africa, and most participants agreed that for them, the major issue is that there are no facilities, technology, or transport capacity to deal with all the waste is being produced. So this might make circularity very, very difficult, right? This question is, of course, for the four of you, but who would like to start?
I would like to comment very, very briefly on that, and I think that Linda will answer something even more beautiful, obviously. But as a general concept, I think no one is really in the world really prepared for recycling all of the waste that we're generating. It's not a problem of some countries. I think it's a global problem. And in my opinion, what we've seen here is that normally in the more poor communities, there is no way of handling the waste. But that's why collaboration is so important. But really understanding collaboration from the depth of the word, not just as a marketing thing. Because when you do that, then you can put many organizations together to solve that particular problem, and I'm sure that it can be solved. Like here we have metals, fishing nets, and other kinds of plastic that we collect for our products. We only use, for our sunglasses, we only use like 5 tons a year, but we're collecting over 150. We can't manage all of that, but we are working with 6 other recycling companies that they take this waste and they use it for other products. And then we invited, for example, a big transport, like a DHL kind of company, like a logistics 3PL company, and they are subsidizing the transport because they want to get involved in the storytelling and with the community. So there's ways around it, but I believe the key answer for that, in my opinion at least, is collaboration.
Great, thank you. Linda?
Yeah, so first of all, I think, it's important to stress that I don't think the circular economy is actually new to many developing countries, certainly to Africa. Maybe the term circular economy, but I think in developing countries, we've been driving circularity for decades. It's probably been driven more by poverty and by need than necessarily by policy design. And I think then the question becomes, how do we identify and recognize that? And how do we help to improve and facilitate? If it's innovative things like creating maker spaces or shared areas where people can collect or sort or stockpile or beneficiate the material. We see this, for example, with electronic waste, for example, a lot of work happening in West Africa. So I think it's really around saying, how do we create an enabling environment to take these little seeds of circularity that we already see, for example, in Africa, and to scale that up, not necessarily to formalize it, but to scale it up, kind of thing. I think the other thing as well is that, we hear a lot of messaging that, the consumers are the problem. Consumers are the ones that want these products, and the brand owners essentially wash their hands of the problem and kind of, pass all the responsibility and the blame onto the consumers. And I absolutely agree with Thomas, is that, we have to have partnerships in terms of solving this problem with civil society, with government, with business. We have to collectively solve this problem in terms of end-of-life management of products, resource management, sustainable consumption and production, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the thing that really scares me from a continent perspective is I've been in the waste game now for more than 20 years, and I just see how this issue is scaling up in Africa. How this issue of uncontrolled dumping and, just on curbsides within cities, for example, how it's just becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and issues around, basic city cleansing, about basic waste collection. We have to get that in place. And the problem is, it's a bit of a catch-22, because, citizens don't necessarily want to pay for services because they don't see that they're getting, value for their money and anything in return. But without payment for services, local government is kind of left in a difficult position of not being able to render services. So, it's bringing civil society on that journey with us, and then absolutely public-private partnerships in helping to solve this problem. So, I mean, this is not an easy problem to solve. This is a systemic problem, and it's going to take everybody. It's going to require everybody to help solve this problem, because otherwise we're going to be having exactly the same discussion in 30 years' time.
Definitely, absolutely agree with every single thing that you have said. I think also that with the last two answers, we have answered Christopher Corbin's question, and which actually Christopher was one of our panelists a few weeks ago. So if we haven't done it good enough, Christopher, please tell us so in the chat, and we will ask again. Nadia, would you like to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that we can have like a long list of problems or a long list of limitations, but we cannot stop to listen or to read them. We need to really take action and understand what we can do as a person, as a professional. It doesn't matter if you are you don't have to be a marine biologist or have a a background in science to understand this problem, or in economy. We can do anything where we are. So if you work in human resources in a company, or if you are a designer, you can just rethink the way we are doing, or how the system is working. Many times I am faced with a comment that nobody does it. Why should I do it if the responsibility is from the government, or from the company, or from my neighbor? We are constantly running away from the cause of the problem, and if we are not, if we don't feel connected to the cause, it's difficult to be connected to the solution. So I'm always trying to give the message that it doesn't matter where you are, who you are, how old you are. You can really take decisions that can promote a change in a systemic way. Just wanted to add that to what Linda said.
No, great. Thank you very much for your addition. Justine, would you like to add something?
Yes, maybe just because also Nadia was talking about responsibility, and I think when it comes to waste management, maybe the issue is slightly different in Europe, and we're seen as, people that can manage their waste, but that is not true. And that has been shown very clearly the last years as well, and also brought to the attention how much of a global issue it is. And especially because, so you may know that in Europe, more or less recycling rates are around 30%, which means that the rest is still going to landfill, incineration, or the environment. Incineration is still really big in Europe, while we know it has major environmental and health impact. And mainly because a lot of money has been put into it, and now the infrastructure are there, and they want more waste and more waste. Europe has also been very good at trying to export incineration in other regions, selling it as the magic bullet. Well, it's not at all. And then a lot of, what we said we were recycling as European waste actually were sent abroad in other countries, mainly in Southeast Asia, but also in Africa and other parts of the world, to be recycled, but most of the time were never recycled indeed. And so the whole waste trade issue, and with countries starting to close their borders, it was really a strong signal, because Europe always, a few years ago, Europe could still say, the plastic pollution issue, it's mainly Southeast Asia and it's mainly Africa, it's not so much Europe. But then with this reality of, well, a lot of the waste that is there is actually our waste consumed in Europe. You can't just avoid the situation. So it also brings this element of collaboration, that there's a need to indeed bring governments and actors from all across the world together. And of course, the situation is different from one country to the next, but there's definitely a lot of solutions that are partly common or with common principles, and then can be adapted. So I think this is very key. And I would say just maybe one thing that we haven't mentioned at all, that is one of the barriers also to the circular economy at the moment is the presence of chemicals in plastics. One of the limitations for recycling plastic is the design of the product, because it's often non-recyclable, but also because it contains often hazardous chemicals that will make recycling more difficult, or that would also just bring issues, because you would keep recycling content that is actually hazardous to human health. And I think often this is not mentioned much, but this is also a barrier that we need to address, is how we clean the toxic, the plastic material that we use, if we continue to use it for reusable applications, etc. Thanks.
No, very thorough. Thank you very much. So we have just 8 minutes left. I'm not sure if I said it in the beginning, but normally if everyone is agree, or if not, if you have to leave at 7 or 2 where you are in Chile, we could go on a few more minutes, because normally people start asking a lot of questions. So I have 2 more questions prepared, but I think that it would be great to let some of our ocean leaders to ask. So I'm going to, so here, I'm very sorry for mispronouncing your name in advance, but Subramanian Ramaviji ask if Thomas can talk a bit more about people using the income money as seed money to make micro entrepreneurs. Like, what kind of stuff do the people in your area go on to build with this seed money?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, so what we do is we work, normally we work with what people already do. So we analyze, we study the economic activities of the places we go into. We normally do a 6-month research with an economist, a biologist, a sociologist, and an anthropologist that lives in the place for 6 months. So to really map out and really understand the economic activities. Normally in places where there's a lot of nature, tourism is always very strong, even if the infrastructure is bad, and even if as an absolute number is very small, relatively speaking to the rest of the economy of the place, is normally relevant. So that's one part. The second part is related to traditions. So what we try to promote is small economic activities that generate an economic incentive for the nature conservation. For example, people that have their own small cabins, people that harvest native mushrooms, people that make their own empanadas, like typical Chilean food, in front of a marvelous view of a volcano, or people that work with locally harvested happy eggs. So anything that has to do with using nature or needing nature for their economy for the business to work, then we work with them. There's a bunch of different examples. One example that I always give because it's easy to understand is a couple, Pedro and Rosa. Pedro is a guy, he collects the fishing nets or the metals like old cans and a lot of other different metals. He receives the income, and then that income, then he invests into his wife. His wife's name is Rosa. And Rosa's dream for 15 years was to have her own little empanadas restaurant and to fund her daughter's education, university. And now she has a tiny little restaurant, a beautiful restaurant in front of the volcano, where she receives her visitors, tourists. And with that income, she's now being able to pay the university for her family, which was never possible. And all of that has been funded by waste. And that is turned into the sunglasses. So that's, for example, one example.
Wow. Yeah, definitely you have a successful business model that is not business as usual. We also have one question from Rita Pedro, and she said that it's all about, sorry, next one. Maria Sofia Barbosa asked, to what extent do you all focus or emphasize microplastic issues in your work? Because so far we have talked, everything we have talked about is material product, but do you focus anything on microplastics? Or do you see any kind of possible way of including circularity within microplastic, which I guess it has to do with the chemistry and the toxicity that you were talking about, Justine, and at level.
Sure, I can share a little bit what we do on microplastic in Europe. So I would say one is all the work we're doing on macroplastics, all the packaging, etc. It's actually serving the microplastic issue as well, because most of the microplastics still come from the degradation of bigger plastic like packaging, etc. when it gets into the water. I think it's good to always remember that. And then we also work on other sources of microplastics. So we do work on microplastics, for example, in cosmetics that are intentionally added to cosmetics, while you could have easily another alternative. But also in detergents, in some of the fertilizers as well. So you find microplastic in a very wide variety of products. And the European Union at the moment is in the process of restricting the use of those microplastics that are intentionally added into products, so that producers will have to find alternatives, most of which already exist. And then there are other sources of microplastic that we're also working on. One is what I mentioned is the pellets. So that's, you know, basically the raw plastic materials. Those tend to be lost during transportation or at the production sites. And we're pushing to make sure that a number of best practices are put in place. It's just about making sure that, you know, the bags are solid enough, for example, during transport, or that if there's a drain, there would be something to block the pellets to get in the drain, like very simple things that are easy to put in place, but that most producers still not put in place. So we're pushing towards legislating that to make it mandatory. And then there's a big issue with microfibers. So all the microplastic coming from our clothes, because a lot of the clothes we wear at the moment is polymer based, plastic based, and that's a bit more tricky. But the European Union is also looking into where that could be reduced as well from the design of the products. But I think this source will take longer to sort because it's just very complex, to be honest.
Definitely.
Also, in Loop, in Loop, we are also working with microplastics. In one side, we try to share information and make the problem more visible, understanding that these are really, really tiny pieces of plastic. We have conducted a little research in supermarkets, for example, and we looked for products and brands that contain microbeads. And all the information that we collected, we shared it with Beat the Microbead, which is a platform that that users are using to be more specific while buying products, no? or trying to avoid the products that have microplastic. And nowadays we are developing a system to start applying into in our beach cleanups and try to understand what kind of information we can collect from the microplastics that we find on the beach, and try to do the same thing that we have done with the macroplastics, no? and try to collect some data and share it with the producers, but also with the consumer and also with the governments. So we are working around that also.
Great.
Well, we are at time, so we're now at the hour. So I just want to wrap things up. We can still, carry on the conversation a little bit longer. A couple of points that I wanted to bring up that were things that I was hearing. A lot of what Thomas was talking about in terms of getting to really know the community, and before we dive in there with a solution to their waste problem, we really understand sort of the root causes of that. During our first SOA Connects, I moderated a panel that looked at community grassroots solutions, and that really, those were looking at issues like sea turtle conservation and fisheries conservation, but the root, that same idea of understanding the community and really identifying with them, figuring out what it is that challenges them, why it is that they have the types of behaviors that they have, and really addressing that. A lot of times it's motivated, destructive environmental habits are motivated by other perverse economic incentives or inequalities or things like that. So I think I really appreciated you mentioning that really universal sort of truth, Thomas. And then I also just wanted to point out the connections about different issues we talked about today in relation to the other panels that we've already had on plastics. So Justine talked about the chemicals that are in recycled plastics. I actually asked that question on our Research It panel, and our guest, I don't remember which professor, but from Ireland, had told us that she had actually asked a bunch of manufacturers if they knew about that, and they refused to answer her, basically. And so we've been talking about all of these issues. So I just encourage everyone who hasn't to take a look at our other webinars, because a lot of these issues, from circularity to the research to cleanups, which we'll talk about later on, are all really interrelated. So on that note, and a little bit over, I will invite all of our panelists to give any 1 minute takeaway that they have from this webinar on circularity. And thank you everyone, participants and panelists, for joining.
Thank you very much, guys. A real pleasure.
If you want to say anything, you can. Any like closing, less than a minute closing remarks.
I think from my side, the question when it comes to plastics and the circular economy is really, how do we scale? How do we scale these initiatives up? There's so many wonderful ideas out there, so many great initiatives, so many social enterprises, for example, that are doing fantastic work. But, it really is urgent that we start to scale up these initiatives to address this plastic wave that's impacting every country.
On that note, Linda, I would love if you share with us some of your papers and reports that I know that you have written, because they are really, really good. And they are not, sometimes science is complicated to read, but you do it in a way that is actually very easy to understand. And I think that our participants would very much appreciate to be able to have this information. So if you don't mind, you can send them to me over the email, and I will share it with the rest of participants. Thank you.
That's really.
Yeah, I would echo what Linda said. I think scale up is definitely the challenge, and it's great to hear all those local initiatives, and we also see it with cities at the local level that are doing a great job, and how we can make that happen across the world. And for me, there are also here a question of money, because investments will play a role in what are the solutions of tomorrow. And so far, we've seen most of the investments going into rather than to local and more social enterprises and initiatives. So I think the investment discussion is also key in all of this.
Thank you. Nadia, would you like to say some last words?
Yeah, no, only thank you all for creating this space. I can also share the report of this that has all the information that we have collected from the beach cleanings, and how we have reached the public sector through our citizens' efforts. And yes, so I think that through you, if any of the participants here wants to reach us, please give our information, and we are always open to the questions, to the suggestions, and any comments that you can have. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much to you all for giving us some of your precious time. And Thomas, would you like to say some few remarks?
Just to remember that we are all nature. If we remember that, then it's going to be easier to build a new world. That's all.
Good. Good. So thank you very much for having joining us today, and hope to be in touch with you, all of you, in the future. And hopefully we have some, as we said, collaboration and so on in the future. And would you like to say something else, Ron?
Nope. I will just say thank you to everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks on November 4th. Our next webinar will be Remake It, and we will be talking with people who are working on alternative materials, different products that are made with alternative plastics or avoiding plastic altogether. So we'll be talking about how we can remake the products that we use every day. And with that, I guess I will sign us all off. So
thank you very much. Have a nice week. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.